I love looking to the natural world and the living systems, which is a collective experience. It's not based on an individual. And it feels to me, in fact, Thich Nhat Hanh is known for having said that the next Buddha will be a Sangha, meaning that the next great enlightened teacher will be a community.
Hello, everybody. It's Christine. I get a lot of requests to be on the podcast that come over the transom, and rarely does something come over that is so resonant with what I believe in the reemergence of an eco-spiritual sense of the whole world being ensouled and holy, that addresses this sort of necessity to heal the split between the material world and spirituality, that the spirit is in everything that's material, and that we return to a sense of the sacred holy world. So when I received the pitch about summoned by the earth, becoming a holy vessel for healing the world, the topic of today's podcast, I was really moved by the narrative and story that Cynthia shared in the book. She talks about this heartbreaking open moment of just deep sorrow for what was happening in her home area where they were storing nuclear waste in the mountains sort of behind her house, and this basic sense that the world had lost touch with the preciousness and sacredness of our ecosystems. And this spiritually informed, I would say, journey of activism that has carried her through the last 40 years, almost 50 years, which has taken her across the planet, working with and doing ceremony and ritual with people in some of the most troubled or environmentally at-risk areas in the world. She has structured this around a practice called Earth Treasure Vases. So we start with that. What is this practice?
It's not a well-known practice, although it is carried out by many of the lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, the practice of the Earth Treasure Vases. It was originating in the 8th century with Guru Rinpoche, or Padmasambhava, who brought forth many practices, some of which were not actually intended for the times that he lived, but rather intended for our times. And this is one of them. It's a practice that is meant to bring healing and protection to the earth. What happened for me is that I was invited to go and meet an old wise man in a cave living up in the high Himalayas in Nepal in 1990. And I was immediately drawn to wanting to go on such an adventure, but it didn't really dawn on me until I was literally walking up the path that I had this opportunity to ask him a question, and I wanted to ask him something that would be meaningful, not just to me, but to many others who could never make such a trip themselves. So I contemplated what to ask him, and what came to me was to inquire about what we could do to bring healing and protection to the earth. That was the question, and it is still the question for me. It's been my guiding question for my life, and I, anyway, received this practice of working with the Earth Treasure Vases from this old lama who said, you just need to get these and put them in the ground and they will do that work. And he directed me to a monastery where I could have them made. My rational mind was confused, maybe is a word I could use to, in the least, say that I didn't really understand how a little clay pot filled with prayers for healing and protection of the earth and symbolic offerings could actually affect the kinds of change that we are needing today. But I thought that this is what's coming to me, and I asked where I could get them, and I was directed to this monastery, and there they really heard the depth of my concern for the earth and made the vases in such a way that they mixed a lot of potent medicines into the clay itself and consecrated them, and then gave them to us to fill with our own offerings and take to places in the world where healing and protection is needed. And we did that, and we still do it, where we bring the vases open so people in those locations can make their own offerings that are meaningful to them for that place. And this has brought the practice alive for these times, because in today's world, healing and protection is needed in every corner of the planet. And a practice that comes out of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is different than what might be done in Africa or Australia or some of these other locations.
That part of it, even the part where you're walking up the mountain and you're finding your question. I think so many people don't find their question early enough in life that they can then do the kind of long arc activism, unraveling, emergence that you've done. So it's such a gift to find the question that is going to be the question of your life.
Truly it is. It took me a while to realize that I had found that question, but it was the burning question. And I encourage people now to realize that we each are part of Gaia. We each have a role to play, a gift to offer, and the little clay pots, the Earth Treasure Vases, remind us that while we have this, or we may have this opportunity to work with a little holy vessel such as this, we have to remember that we're each holy vessels in our own way, and we each have so many beautiful offerings for the world, and the world needs us. Mother Earth needs us now.
The piece about the vases, what I found really interesting is, I can go into sort of an understanding of them as mystical artifacts, but then the way that they are implemented, with you carrying them around in these localized and locally adapted rituals, is really a ceremony of drawing attention and care to that part of the earth and its suffering. It's a healing ritual. And the way that you've done it has gone so far beyond like putting a mystical object in the ground. I really love that. Some of the stories are, of these, I was particularly moved by the women who looked inside of the vase and saw that there was not great treasures, and then felt that they could make their offering, their simple offering. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I took one of the treasure vases to the Democratic Republic of Congo. I went there partly because, it's considered by some to be the rape capital of the world. Rape is such an epidemic in Congo, and I wanted to address that as one of the core wounds that need to be healed in this world, and to make relations with the women of Congo who are so beautiful. And also because the second largest rainforest in the world is in Congo, outside of Brazil, and it needs protection. So I had some incredible experiences there, and actually ended up taking the Earth Treasure Vase into the forest and finding there the Pygmy people, the original peoples of that land, indigenous culture, amazing indigenous culture, and was very blessed to receive the support and interest from that community, and brought the vase to them to be planted in the forest. And the women really took a great interest, and I was guided by a woman who has now become really a world leader. Her name is Nema Namadamu. She started a nonprofit called Hero Women Rising, and she accompanied me on this journey. And she and all the others I spoke to didn't really realize that their forest, at the time I was there, that their forest is providing oxygen for us to breathe in the United States and elsewhere, and so important. So among her many projects, one of them is planting trees. In any case, when we brought the Earth Treasure Vase out into this community gathering outside of the forest with these Pygmy leaders, they were so curious. They wanted to know what was inside, because it was called an Earth Treasure Vase, and they figured it was, treasures. And so we sent it around the circle, which we do anyway, because we want people to hold it and place their prayers and offerings into it. And when they looked inside, they saw that it was filled with sacred earth from places where we had been with the treasure vases around the world, rice and grains symbolic of, prosperity and nourishment, herbs that are known to be healing, all kinds of other things, but nothing really terribly valuable in the normal sense. But of course, all of those offerings are incredibly precious. And they realized that they could make offerings that were meaningful too. And one person had brought a special fruit that is gathered in the forest. These are hunter-gatherer people by nature. It's a fruit that is very revered and loved. And they asked if that would be a good offering. And of course it was. And then somebody literally reached down and picked up a little pinch of the earth under where we were gathered and said, well, what about this? This is our land, And so like that, I had just been with the gorillas that live in the forests of Congo, who are so endangered, and gathered up a little bit of that blessed land where they are living in refuge, and, just all kinds of offerings everywhere we go with the vases. But that was just such a beautiful moment.
Yeah, and it also seems like it's touching on so much of what needs protection or healing or justice in some way. The women, the gorillas, the land itself, the forest, which is probably a good segue into talking about how you choose or have chosen where to place the vases. I know the first one was Los Alamos, and that was in your own backyard. So let's start there.
Yeah, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and across the Rio Grande Valley is the town of Los Alamos, which was built up around the making of the first and second atomic bombs at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, which land was taken from the local indigenous peoples here. I think most of us now know the story of the making of the bomb. So I was very concerned. This was back in 1990, and I was just beginning to understand the repercussions of the radioactive waste that comes off of the production of nuclear weapons and how it affects the watershed and the earth, the land, the plants, the animals, the whole entire web of life for really literally hundreds of thousands of years. And this was a real wake-up call for me, in also why I asked the question of the old lama in the cave. But in any case, that was the first location. And I consider it to be the center of what we now call the global healing mandala of locations all around the planet where we have taken these treasure vases. In the beginning, it was really hard to know how or where to do this. I mean, it was so overwhelming that, in fact, I put them away for about 5 years. I didn't even touch them because I didn't know how to do this. But then we started having all of the signs, of climate change and forest fires and droughts and, this sort of unraveling of the web of life in so many ways around the world. And so we started with this cave that is actually kind of in the wilderness above, but not far above Los Alamos National Lab. And that's where we planted the first one. And it was such a powerful thing to do, believe me. And then we went into each of the 4 directions from there of what I call the Rio Grande bioregion, which is the region defined by the Rio Grande River that makes up this whole area. And so we went to the source of the Rio Grande because rivers are supposed to carry the prayers down, all the way from where they're planted. And like the prayer flags that you may have seen carrying the prayers on the wind, it's a similar idea. And then we put one at the mouth of the Rio Grande where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico. And then we put one on top of each of the 2 highest mountains in this region, because also those are very good locations as well. So that's how we started. And so we created the basic form of the mandala is the center and the 4 directions. And this is a teaching that's found in many traditions around the world, but it's been kind of informing our practice for all this time. And And then from there, the treasure vases started to just go out around the planet to all kinds of different places. At first, I thought I had to figure it all out, but I realized pretty quickly that whenever I tried to figure it out, it was not such a good idea. Things didn't go so well as when I allowed the treasure vases actually to sort of be my guide and to ask Gaia, to ask the earth herself, where is a good place? And also to let people come forward and say, this would be a location that would be good. And gradually it grew, to where we have actually thousands of people around the planet who have been engaged in this practice and who are still stewarding Earth Treasure Vases to different places around the world, forming this great global mandala.
Yeah, it's like the network, those little filament lines that you can see connecting the globe, the invisible filaments. I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the vases as a communal endeavor. Oh, and then I also loved seeing that Joanna Macy did the second one. Actually, just in terms of the people who endorsed your book, it was like this beautiful, David Abrams, The Spell of the Sensuous. And, come on, you clearly have been weaving a life where such beloveds are aware of your work and supporting your work. And it was so nice to see the Grande Dame, Joanna Macy, taking it on with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've known Joanna since the 1980s, actually. And she was really an inspiration around this coming into an understanding of the repercussions of radioactive waste at Los Alamos, actually, because sometime back in the early 90s, especially, she was really talking a lot about what she called nuclear guardianship and the need to protect the earth from these substances and to keep the awareness of the substances alive for many, many generations to come, and so that we don't lose sight of the fact that this has been placed into the earth and needs to be guarded. So that was some of Joanna's early work that I was involved in.
Like a transgenerational carrier of the message. Like, for example, I was in, I want to say Varanasi by the Burning Ghats, and you had literally like families that had been honoring and keeping the flame alive at the Burning Ghats for 16 generations or more. They knew what it was about and they held it in their heart, and it not at all an individualistic understanding of what one's here to do on the planet, but like they're the holders of the transmission and the lineage for all of humanity in that particular piece. And as you're speaking, I could see that being a need if you're thinking in 10,000 year cycles, as Stuart Brand says, or in this case with a nuclear waste, 250,000 year cycles. How do you keep people aware of it? What a duty.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's where Joanna was coming from, and what we are so concerned about. People they want to bury these substances under the ground, out of sight and out of mind, but they're not out of the watersheds. They're not out of the web of life just by burying them and putting them away so we don't have to think about them. And you're right, that's a great example, a certain issue that has been, or practice, that has been kept alive generation to generation. And not that many people are thinking about this in relationship to nuclear waste, and it's a major issue facing life on Earth.
In parallel with the work you were doing with the vases, you're going on this deep spiritual journey to the point of becoming a lama in the Buddhist traditions and wrestling with all these issues around patriarchy in the tradition that you've chosen. And I think it's so interesting to look at the intersection between your inner life and the development of your inner characteristics and what you're able to do in the world, because that seems to lead to a fortitude that is not available to those caught up in the cycle of daily life in such an intense way.
You're right. I gave my life to this, and I was practicing and still am, very deeply in the Buddhist tradition. My original teacher was and is Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm a teacher in his tradition. And then because of the depth with which I took up this practice of the Earth Treasure Vases, as well as many years of practice in retreat in several lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, I was recognized as a lama. But that was a challenging situation, because for many years I was grappling with the patriarchal, hierarchical structure of the way that the beautiful teachings of Tibetan Buddhism are passed along inside of a system that is actually fraught with quite a lot of abuse and power issues and abuse of women. And, there's just some issues and inadequacies as that tradition is being carried out in this day and age that just aren't okay with me. And I came to actually realize that for me, I was going to have to let go of the relationship to the gurus that is what is the basis of that tradition, really. And that as I got more and more deeply connected to the earth through this practice, in answer to my own prayer, I realized that Gaia is my greatest teacher. And actually, I feel as if the earth is the great teacher of our times, because if we stop long enough to, look around and pay attention to what's happening, every single one of us will realize that we're in for it, if we don't make some changes. And so the opportunity to wake up, to become aware of where we are in this beautiful, as I like to say, blue-green planet we call home, with this incredible web of life and all the living systems of the earth that work harmoniously together and can teach us so much about how to be, that we have so forgotten or gotten so out of touch with, And so I have kind of gone out on my own. I consider the title of Lama to be an honorary title. I'm so grateful to all of my teachers and the experiences that I've had and the incredible practices that have been given to me. And yet I'm not qualified, really, honestly, as a Lama in the normal way, in the way that most people would be if they were called that. The title was given to me really in recognition of the treasure vase practice and how I've dedicated my life to that. But it has led me into some very interesting new directions, I'll tell you.
Like what?
Well, I now teach a practice that came out of, I was doing a practice, if you're at all familiar with the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Tara is one of the well-known deities, female deities, who I have had a very long-term relationship with. She helped me a lot to carry these treasure vases around the world. But at a certain point, I really started to sense that I was really asking for and yearning for a direct relationship with Gaia, that Tara was sort of filling in for that. She was doing a pretty good job, but it was really like, well, what is this connection to the earth that I'm experiencing, because the earth was talking to me and guiding me and informing everything I was doing. And I would come back from these far-flung pilgrimages and go into retreat and, meditate and practice and pray and walk the land with my dog and do those kinds of things and ask for what was next. And one day I was doing my practice, and this mantra arose that is a mantra of Gaia. It's not a mantra of Tara, it's a mantra of Gaia. And I began to recite it. And as I did, the image or the visualization of the deity began to shift and change to where I realized I was invoking her. And in the practice, we imagine ourselves also as Gaia and realize the inseparability from ourselves and from the earth. And then we also imagine all of our healing intentions going out around the planet wherever it's called for. And this is also what we do on the full moon every month and have for many, many years now, almost over 30 years, with the practice of the Earth Treasure Vases. And so that practice too, while it has come out of the tradition, has evolved into something very non-denominational, very secular, really, that anybody can relate to, because we don't want to impose anything on anyone, and just as an offering, as a way to connect with what we love and care about most, what we want to see in the world, to feed that spirit and to plant seeds of peace and of healing and of regeneration and all of those things that are so deeply called for.
I can so relate to this. I was given a little bit of Christ consciousness, and that was sort of stripped away by the church.
Yes.
I mean, I still find myself bowing down in devotion to the mystery, but it often takes the form of the effulgent, radiant wonder in all of the natural world, or in the space between people, or in the heart of a person, because those structures seem so much to corrupt and deny that. And and yet one of the principles that I've learned is that no make wrong, no judgment is at the core of coming fully into the light. And so I find being discerning about those structures, while at the same time not making them wrong, to still be a little challenge.
It is. I agree. It's wonderful, though, to hear you speak to it, Christine, because I think so many of us struggle with that issue. And Mother Earth is a reliable source of refuge. It's a place where we can all find that part of ourselves alive and well, and it's not dependent on an external structure or belief system. So it feels to me like this is something that is just so needed as the world transforms. The world is really transforming before our very eyes, and let's be part of that in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm seeing actually is so resonant. Maybe your vases did the job, because I travel a lot. We have a little eco village on the Big Island, and I'm fortunate enough to go to a lot of these global hotspots, which there is a global concurrent emerging Gaian spirituality with the same rituals and mythologies all around the world, and it's moving very quickly. From Ubud and Tulum out into the nether regions of the Midwest, and into, it's just happening that the insanity of hierarchical imposed structures over the beauty of the given reality is sort of dawning on people in a lot of corners. I was today on a break, we went into the cathedral here, and I walked in, and it's Spanish, which means that it's like exquisite in every detail, and it's gilding and it's carving and it's stonework and it's statuary, and it's very dolorous sculptures and statuary, by the way, not the joy. But, I was sitting in there and I was thinking, what must have happened is somebody had the realization of the greatness of everything and they had to do something to monumentize it. They had to build something amazing and like to call out that wonder and awe, and that this whole idea of building churches and cathedrals as an honorary thing must have been at some point a deep practice of just trying to express your awe. And then it became about expressing your power and your wealth. And that seems to have diluted it.
Exactly. I took a treasure vase to Greece last year. It was kind of a long-held prayer to take a treasure vase to Delphi. I don't know if you're aware, your listeners are aware, but the original oracle of Delphi was Gaia. And the priestesses that lived and operated there listened to her and were living in relationship to Gaia, who's, according to the Greek mythology, was born there. That was her home. And then the story goes that one of her offspring was a serpent who was the guardian of the oracle of Delphi. And Apollo, when the Greek gods of the hierarchy of the Greek gods took power, then Apollo came and slayed the serpent and took power over that site. It became the oracle of Delphi became Apollo's oracle, which is a very different energy. So I wanted to go there and bring a treasure vase to honor the original source of the knowledge and wisdom and guidance of the oracle that was there, which was Gaia herself.
It's sort of when Apollo kills the snake It's sort of the entry of the patriarchy into the human fractal.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, I think you was speaking on that note, and kind of tied to what Rosebud, what I've been doing with Rosebud Woman for a while. You also speak around, healing your own sexual wounding and healing the feminine in the individual self as kind of a concurrent move with healing the relationship to the earth. You talked a little bit about unwinding it in your own family of origin, like you can't keep secrets, right? You also told that story about being attacked by a lover or partner when you were young and traveling in Afghanistan, right? And then there was the part about like really seeing it in the religious hierarchy, just like, I don't know, I'm jumping all over today, but there's a woman named Deepika who wrote a book called Chup, which is basically the gesture that tells Indian girls to just stop talking, to not have an opinion. And I felt that in some of the stories you were telling, this like guru or hierarchical thing, like don't actually have any opinions, just do what I say. What would feel as resonant for you? Is there some piece that feels most alive now that the book's out? Like what I find is like when I've had a piece that I've worked on for a long time and it's birthed, like it sometimes I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I just want to like, what's next? So what's alive from that part of your work right now that you think people would benefit from hearing?
No, I don't. I'm not sure. The issue of being silenced and being taken advantage of or used in some way, including sexually, is an issue that is found in every family, on every street corner, in every country, in every culture of the entire world. And this is an epidemic that is enough. I mean, it's shocking that in our times, for example, abortion is being stopped in the United States of America, and that women are suffering in the ways that they are for a lack of freedom. It is a huge issue, and there is this power structure that has taken precedence in the world for a very long time that it needs to transform. If we have any hope of establishing balance and harmony in the world and in a relationship to the living systems of the world, because there's no way to separate what we do to each other and what we do to the earth. It's all connected. There's no separation. So, I have my own journey. I went through sexual abuse within the context of my family system, and I was told to keep quiet about it, as so many of us are. And as I deepened into my own spiritual practice, because a meditation practice is very transformational. For some of us, it is anyway. Some of us use it to bypass all those feelings. But if we're practicing deeply and honestly, we'll come into contact with the very things that are preventing us from being free, being liberated, being enlightened, however you want to say that. So I came up against the fact that I had been avoiding these issues, and I brought it out, because I had to. And then I was blamed for it happening as if it were my fault. And that was the cause of my having to basically leave my family behind. I've since done a lot of healing, and, we've gotten through it for the most part, but not completely. Then, sort of simultaneous to that, I began to learn about the abuses within the Buddhist tradition that I was so deeply connected to. And that was when things really started to sort of unravel, and I had to reckon with how this was all connected. For a long time, I thought maybe I was going to have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I really didn't want to do that. That process led me to Congo. We spoke about Congo, and that was a place that I had to go in order to address these issues in myself and in the world. Then I began to find my courage, to stand up and speak out. And it's funny, I did have some wonderful teachers, one of whom was a lama named Gyaltro Rinpoche that I write about. And he used to tell me to stand up, sausage. It's a funny little thread in the book because he gave me that name sausage, and I never knew, why. He gave funny names to everybody, but for some reason he called me sausage, and then he told me to stand up, and I realized in the course of going through my life that I've been asked to stand up in a lot of ways, to speak out, and I take a lot of inspiration from the women of Liberia also, because I also went there with a treasure vase, Liberia being a country in Africa that has had terrible civil war and unrest for many, many years. And it was the women who stopped the war. There's a fantastic film called Pray the Devil Back to Hell that tells that story. But they went out on the streets. It was like this war was going on, and they stopped, feeding their husbands and sons. They stopped having sex with them. They stopped cooking. They stopped doing the laundry, all the things that the women do for the men. And they went out and they dressed all in white, and they sang and they demonstrated, and they would not take no for an answer until they ended up stopping this war. And then they ended up also electing the first woman and president of any country in Africa, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who served 2 terms and then had to retire because they can't go on after that. But anyway, now Liberia is still a conflicted place. And I mean, there's just a lot I could say about all of it. But those women stopped a war. We can do this. We can turn this around, but we have to be able to stand up, and we have to be courageous enough to not be consumed by the dominant culture in telling us what we can do and what we can't do. And, you find this same dynamic very present in many spiritual traditions where in order to maintain power, you're told to just keep quiet. And in the case of some of the Buddhist lineages, you're really not supposed to comment on the abuses, because if you do, you're basically seeing the guru in a negative light, which will damage the relationship permanently and everybody connected, because you're supposed to see them as omniscient. There's many awakened beings in the world. We're also human beings, and that's why I love looking to the natural world and the living systems, which is a collective experience. It's not based on an individual. And it feels to me, in fact, Thich Nhat Hanh is known for having said that the next Buddha will be a Sangha, meaning that the next great enlightened teacher will be a community. And it really points to the fact that we're all in this together. And in this today's world, these times, this is what is upon us. We are not going to be finding just one person to do it for us. And we are looking at the whole of it, the whole living system, all life, as being precious and beautiful and necessary in all its great diversity. There's just not one without the other. So I don't know. That's kind of a long-winded, rambling response, but those are some of the threads that I'm wrote about and I'm working with now.
I love all of that. That's so inspiring. I was thinking about, did you ever see the film, Where Do We Go Now?
I don't think so.
It's very similar to this, the Liberian women in the Praying the Devil back. It won a award in Cannes. I want to say maybe like 10 years ago. I don't know. But it portrays this Lebanese community where the men are about to fight and the women are doing almost everything possible to stop them from fighting. And they use food, they use hashish, they cause car trouble, they bring in sexy girls to distract them. I mean, it's really fantastic. An ode to peace and women, sort of sectarian conflict between Christians and Muslims.
In Liberia, it was the Christian and Muslim women who came together, which they often don't do, but they came together and joined forces.
So we have more power than we think. If you're really tapping in and you don't think you can do anything, maybe take some inspiration from these women banding together to keep our timely for Mother's Day. We were just talking about Mother's Day being started as a anti-war and anti-violence and anti-separatism from the other creatures' activism moment, but that was its original purpose. So really, really lovely work. Not only the book, but your life.
Thank you so much. I'm really moved to hear your response, Christine.
We are on the same page.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
If you could get one message out to everybody in the world, is there any one particular snippet that you would tell them?
Gosh, that's a hard one because there's a big world out there and so much one could say. But what's coming to me in this moment is, if you're looking for what that guiding question is, or what your sense of purpose or your offering, for the healing of the earth is, my suggestion is to take time out from the busyness, the constant busyness, and just come back to your breath. Take a few deep breaths, knowing that when you do, you are literally conspiring with Gaia, breathing in and breathing out, connecting with that web of life. And then, not going into the thinking mind, trying to figure anything out at all, but to just rest in awareness of that connection. And maybe you want to do this outside with your back against a tree, or your toes in the water, or sitting on a rock overlooking a beautiful vista. I don't know, but wherever you can find a little place to root yourself and to be aware of your own node on this incredible mandala of intention for life on earth, and then just to open to what is in your own heart, in your own deepest heart of hearts.
The book is Summoned by the Earth, Becoming a Holy Vessel for Healing Our World. And we've been speaking with Cynthia Jurs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Joanna Macy writes, "We are capable of suffering with our world, and that is the true meaning of compassion. It enables us to recognize our profound interconnectedness with all beings. Don't ever apologize for crying for the trees burning in the Amazon or over the waters polluted from mines in the Rockies. Don't apologize for the sorrow, grief, and rage you feel. It is a measure of your humanity and your maturity. It's a measure of your open heart. And as your heart breaks open, there will be room for the world to heal. That is what is happening as we see people honestly confronting the sorrows of our time." She continues, "If the world is to be healed through human efforts, I am convinced it will be by ordinary people, people whose love for this life is even greater than their fear, people who can open to the web of life that called us into being. You don't need to do everything. Do what calls your heart. Effective action comes from love. It is unstoppable, and it is enough." Those are quotes from the magical and visionary Joanna Macy. If you're interested in these matters of how to activate for the planet from a deep love of life, then I would recommend to you this work by Cynthia Jurs, as well as the work of Joanna Macy, current contemporary philosopher in eco-spirituality, Sophie Strand. I would also recommend some of the work by Charles Eisenstein, and many more like Bio Komalafe, which I probably said that wrong. Apologies, Bio. I'll put those in the show notes. I was thinking about the Hindu and Sanskrit traditions, and every morning the first prayer is called the Gayatri mantra. It goes Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. But that first line, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha, the Bhu is Bhudevi, Bhuvaneshwari, the goddess of earth, and Tat Savitur, Savitur is the sun. And imagine just that simple practice of starting every day, waking up and saying thank you to all of the manifest creation, the world we live in, the earth herself, the atmosphere, the heavens, and the sun, the marriage of earth and sun, without which no life would exist. And just beginning with a little moment of ritual and reverence. And maybe that helps us all tap in to the fragility and beauty and the wonder of this planet. I'd love to hear what questions you're asking and what is burning and alive for you. You can find me at the.rose.woman on Instagram, or at ChristineMarieMason.com. A big shout out to the team at Rosebud Woman, rosewoman.com, the company that I started making beautiful intimate care products, for supporting this podcast all the time. The best offerings for perimenopausal and menopausal moisture, for sensual and sexual activation, and for reverent lifestyle. rosewoman.com.